Bum, 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 bum. Welcome to another episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am Anthony. I'm your host here on Disguise Coverage. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Give me a follow on Twitter. I'm pretty active, fairly regularly seen on the old Twitter. Whatever platform you are using to watch or listen to Disguise Coverage, while you're there, please rate and review and subscribe. I know it may seem small or trivial, but those ratings, those reviews, those subscriptions are tremendously important to myself and to the Cover One team and network as a whole. Again, Disguise Coverage is part of the Cover One Sports Network, so feel free to check out all of the other great content that Cover One offers. We've got the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Greg and Aaron. We've got the Hoof podcast with Sterling, Anthony Romeo, and Eric B. We've also got content for you regarding the NFL draft and player breakdowns, the film room that myself and Eric Turner do. The folks at Cover One, myself included, we are the best when it comes down to Buffalo Bills content and creation and analysis and breakdowns and a lot of things just generally in the NFL, regarding football, regarding the Buffalo Bills. And that is the intro and the spiel for this episode that is the Buffalo Bills hidden storylines for 2021. And in this episode, what we're really going to get into, if you haven't read the description for this episode on whatever platform you're using to watch or listen, we're going to get into some of the under-the-radar storylines for the 2021 season as of now. At this point, I think a lot of this season is coming down, this offseason is coming down to talking about the salary cap and talking about Matt Milano and talking about Darrell Williams and John Feliciano, talking about certain draft picks and who we're going to take and why we're going to take them. And rightfully so, but there are several storylines, again, that are hidden and or under the radar that will influence certain things for this offseason and certain things for the 2021 regular season, and just in general how this Bills team starts to move forward. Some of the things that we're going to go over tonight in this episode are pieces related to the Bills for their foundational development going forward. The Bills, after the season they had in 2020, one of the final four teams in the NFL. They made it to the AFC Championship. Josh Allen had a breakout year. Stephon Diggs led the league in receptions and yards receiving. A lot of great options for where the Bills can go in this 2021 offseason. And it all stems from the fact that the Bills are now a team that are somewhat of a force to be reckoned with. They're a good team. They're a quality unit. They have pieces that will start to carry them forward. And now we're in a position that we really haven't seen a lot as Bills fans, or at the very least in my lifetime. We're in a position now where we're a good football team. We're a top football team. There are eyes on us. We have somewhat of a target on our back. A foundation has been set, and it's a quality foundation, both on the field and off the field, stemming from the leadership at the top with McDermott and Brandon Beane and company, going all the way down to the field and the players. So how do we proceed from here? How do we continue to stay the course in terms of the success that we've had, but also how do we continue to get better? How do you sustain? How do you maintain? How do you continue to grow? Exactly, Joseph. That is a good problem to have. The Bills are in a good spot, and it's a fun spot, but things can turn in a hurry if you don't address them properly. If you don't continue to retool and refine and tweak and get better and grow and fill the cracks and stem the tide in certain areas, things can fall apart in a hurry. And so a lot of the things we spoke on last week's episode regarding the priorities list for this offseason, the previous episode before on Disguise Coverage, Greg Thompson and I broke down the Buffalo Bills salary cap and in the Buffalo Bills salary cap special episode. So all these things are kind of coming together and painting a picture for this offseason. But again, this episode here, really going to focus on some of the under-the-radar aspects, some of the lesser-known storylines. And the first one that we're going to get into here is talking about the fifth-year option for first-round picks. I've seen a lot of discussion, and rightfully so, again, on the old Twitter, on the old interwebs, about what direction the Buffalo Bills should go in when it comes to their first-round pick in the 2021 draft. Should they trade down? Who they should take? Why not? So on and so forth. I've talked a lot about it on Twitter. But a thing that I wanted to drill home, not just for the future, but for drafts in general, first-round picks that you take in the NFL come with a fifth-year option, meaning you basically get them for 5 years of control. No other player in no other positional round player has that. If you pick someone in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, None of those rounds have a fifth-year option. First round does. However, it's different after the new CBA that was passed in 2020. So again, when it comes to fifth-year options, each player selected in the first round of the NFL draft has a team option for a fifth season that is automatically included in their contract, which extends their 4-year rookie contract to a fifth year for a non-negotiable fixed amount. Teams must exercise this option in the time after the end of the player's third regular season, but prior to May of the following league year. Now, before the new CBA this past offseason in 2020, the amount for your fifth-year option came down to where you were drafted. If you were a top 10 pick, you had a certain amount that you could fall into. If you were in pick 11 through 32 in the first round, that qualified you for another amount for that fifth-year option. But after, again, the new CBA last offseason, it changed some things for players drafted in the 2018 first round of the NFL draft and all first rounds going forward. So again, starting with players selected in the first round of the 2018 NFL draft, players can now earn different fifth-year option salaries based on their performance in the first 3 seasons of their career. That fifth-year option for such players is fully guaranteed at the time it is exercised rather than on the first day of the league year of the option. If such a player's fourth-year salary is not fully guaranteed, whether it be for skill, cap and injury, whatever have you, it becomes guaranteed as well when the option is exercised. Now, before we start to break down some things, what does that mean? I threw a lot of terms at you, a lot of things. I'm going to throw 2 more terms at you for relevance here because it holds water when it comes to this conversation. I want to talk about the transition tag and the franchise tag, not holistically, but just in terms of what they mean for this conversation when it comes to fifth-year options. So the transition tag, I think this one's a little lesser known. I think people know what a franchise tag is or have heard it thrown around. The transition tag pays a player an average of the 10 highest paid players at that player's position from the prior year, or 120% of that player's prior year salary. Also, just for knowledge sake, players that are given the transition tag, they're allowed to negotiate with other teams, and their current team can match any offer they get from another team. But if that player leaves, that team that they were on won't be giving compensation if that player leaves. So again, transition tag given to a player, that means that player is paid an average of the 10 highest paid players at their position from the prior year. The franchise tag, there's 2 kinds. We're really going to focus on one in this one. The non-exclusive franchise tag. If a player is given the non-exclusive franchise tag, this is the one you usually see majority of the time when it talks about, okay, this team is going to franchise tag this guy. That's the one you hear when it's thrown around in the offseason circles and discussions, and you see on TV. That's pretty much your non-exclusive franchise tag. If a player receives that, that means they are paid an average of the 5 highest salaries at their position over the last 5 years, or again, 120% of prior year salary. Majority of times for the transition tag and the franchise tag, it's that average scenario. That 120% rarely comes into play. So again, for the non-exclusive franchise tag, if a player is franchise tagged in that manner, the salary that they receive is an average of the 5 highest salaries at their position over the last 5 years. Also, just for reference, a player given this is allowed to negotiate with other teams. But this, however, for their current team, if that player leaves, their current team gets some sort of compensation. They get 2 first-round picks if the offer from the other team is not matched by that current team. So that's also why when teams tag a player, give that franchise tag, that non-exclusive franchise tag, they do it to either retain the player that they have or know they're going to get some sort of compensation. And getting 2 first-round picks is a very legitimate thing. Okay, so transition tag, franchise tag. How does it relate to the fifth-year option? Great question. I'm glad you asked. We're going to get into it now. So those fifth-year options, again, now, after the CBA from the 2020 offseason and now applying to players selected in the first round of the 2018 draft and going forward, there's multiple ways in terms of how a fifth-year option can be paid out for a player. So for a fifth-year option, for a first-round pick now, well, from 2018 on. If that player makes 1 Pro Bowl on the original ballot in any of their first 3 seasons, the salary that they are paid for their 5th-year option is equal to the transition tag of that player's 4th year. Okay? If they make more than 1 Pro Bowl on the original ballot in any of their first 3 seasons, the salary that they are paid in their 5th-year option is equal to the franchise tag value of their position in that player's 4th year. Okay? Now here's where it gets a little trickier. If they didn't make the Pro Bowl on the original ballot in any of their first 3 years, but they did one of the following: if they played in at least 75% of the snaps in 2 of their first 3 regular seasons, or played in a cumulative average of 75% of the snaps over their first 3 regular seasons, or logged at least 50% of the snaps in each of their first 3 seasons, if they did any of those things and did not make the Pro Bowl on their original ballot, the salary that they receive, their base salary, amounts to the player's 4th season salary cap average of the 3rd to the 20th highest paid players at that position. Again, average of that from that player's 4th season. Last type of criteria: if they didn't make the Pro Bowl on the original ballot and did not play in at least 75% of the snaps in 2 of their first 3 regular seasons, or did not play in a cumulative average of 75% of the snaps over the first 3 regular seasons, or did not log at least 50% of the snaps in each of their first 3 seasons, the base salary that they get, it amounts to the 4th season salary cap average of the 3rd to 25th highest paid players at that position, again, from that player's 4th season. A little bit of numbers, a little bit of numerical jargon to start this episode. I wanted to throw that in there just so it sinks in a bit. And if anybody, again, watching live, as I know a lot of you are, questions on that, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free to throw it at me here, or follow me on Twitter, throw it on Twitter, or just at me in general, whatever. I recognize there could be some confusion to that. But I say all of that to say this: when we're talking about who the Bills are going to look at in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft, knowing that you take someone in the first round, basically, it's not guaranteed, but majority of the time, you are going to get that player for a cost-controlled 5 seasons minimum. Ideally, you are going to get that. And so having that level of cost control makes first-round picks pretty legitimately important. And when you're thinking about what position you want the Bills to draft or attack in this upcoming NFL draft, especially in the first round, we'll just take it there. There's a lot of options. Even the trade down option. People are talking about trading back, going into the second round, acquiring more picks, especially in this COVID offseason, this nuclear winter that Greg Thompson has coined. Because there's not going to be a lot of money, you want to acquire as many picks as you can so you can have cheaper contracts and still have value, fill out your roster. There's so many options. But again, if you don't have that first round pick, you're not getting a 5th-year option for anybody that you take, because rounds 2 through 7 do not carry a 5th-year option. But say the Bills stay in that first round, right? What type of position do you want the Buffalo Bills to draft that you would be able to have cost control for roughly the next 5 years? Do you want it to be an offensive lineman? Someone that can potentially anchor the line and be under cost control for the next 5 years and continue to protect and keep Josh Allen safe? Do you want it to be on the defensive line, an edge rusher, or someone in the middle potentially to keep Tremaine Edmunds and the other linebackers free, or provide pressure off the edge to continue to rush the passer? We know how important it is to generate pressure on the quarterback. We saw what a lack of it can do when you play the Kansas City Chiefs, and we saw what an abundance of it can do when you play the Kansas City Chiefs. The abundance came in the Super Bowl for the Buccaneers. The lack of it came in the AFC Championship against the Bills. Unfortunate for us. Or, are you not focusing on offensive line or defensive line? Do you take a corner in round 1 and have somebody under cost control for 5 years to pair up with Tre'Davious White while you shore up some of the other options? Or, and this is where the crux of it comes through, do you draft a running back in the first round? And this is why I say it's the crux, because giving a running back the amount of money they would get in that 5th-year option, granted it's under that cost control factor and that cost control model, but giving that amount to someone and locking up a running back with that amount of money for that term in today's NFL, I just don't think it carries that type of value. And I love Najee Harris. I really like Travis Etienne. But if you're going to take a running back in that first round, understandable, it adds another element. They're dynamic, it's fun, it's exciting. But recognize how you are allocating your financial and draft capital resources by doing so. Do you really need to have term and money invested in that running back position for a fifth-year option, knowing the type of value that you can find throughout the rest of the draft, throughout free agency? Alvin Kamara is a perfect example of this on both sides. I love Alvin Kamara. He's my favorite player in the NFL. I love how versatile he is. I love his balance, his style of play, versatility, what the routes that he runs, the hands, the power, the speed, the quickness, all of that, right? It's tremendous. I love him. I'm not giving him the contract that he got this past offseason because I don't think there's the return on investment at the running back position like that. And I also say he's the example of both sides because he's amazing, but I'm not going to give him that type of contract. And on the flip side, he was a third-round pick who was developed into one of the best running backs in the NFL. The running back position, and this sounds disrespectful, and I feel bad that it sounds that way, and also it kind of is, but the running back position doesn't hold enough value year after year because that position is somewhat easily replenishable from both a free agent and draft perspective. And as we stated in the beginning of this episode, as the Bills go forward and start to build a solid foundation and replenish the foundation and continue to build and get better, fix and tweak and get better and revamp, all those things, where you invest your resources and how you invest your resources suddenly becomes a very important thing. It already is. It always is in the NFL. But especially when you're trying to sustain success that you've built, the contracts you give out, both in term and money, become very important. So keep that in your brains as we are starting to get into this draft season, as the draft comes around in April, and as we start to see more prospect talk and thought from everyone regarding the Buffalo Bills coming through this offseason, and you're thinking about that first round of who you want the Bills to take in the first round. Just remember that that fifth-year option, that first-round picks carry, and do you want to sacrifice that fifth-year option on position A, position B, why, so on and so forth. And doing so carries certain ramifications with that. I want to get to some of the questions and thoughts that we're starting to get through here in the chat. What about Aaron Jones from the Green Bay Packers due to the Packers salary cap and now that they have A.J. Dillon? I love Aaron Jones. I'm a massive proponent of free Aaron Jones when it comes to fantasy football. I think he's going to be too expensive for the Buffalo Bills. I don't think the Bills have the financial resources to be able to commit the amount of money to Aaron Jones that he will command on the open market. Also regarding that, I don't think, he's going to get a decent sized contract, and I'm just not a fan in general of giving those second time contracts to running backs. I like taking guys that you can get on a 1 or 2 year cheaper type of deals, or drafting guys and seeing them out through the 4 years of their contract, drafting a guy in round 2 or 3 and seeing their term out that way, rather than taking somebody like, again, as much as I love him, Alvin Kamara or Aaron Jones, and re-upping those guys and sinking a lot of money into that position. It's tough for me to sink a lot of capital in terms of money, but also term into a position like that. Taylor throwing out Jamal Williams, I like that a lot. One, because of the dynamic that he could offer this Buffalo Bills offense, his route running, his effectiveness in the receiving game. And as a person who's at Aaron Jones in fantasy football and watched a lot of Packers games, he's a better runner than people want to give him credit for. I think Jamal Williams could be a really cool option, especially at the current average annual value that he's projected at. You sign him, someone like Jamal Williams or even James White or Mike Davis from Carolina, somebody who you can get on a 1 to 2 year cheapier type of deal at a lower average annual value that offers a different dynamic and offers a complement to the current running back room and to the offense as a whole. Give me a running back that can win on routes out of the backfield, that can beat linebackers in coverage, that is smart and savvy when they get out in space in terms of their route running and receiving awareness. I think the Bills can do wonders with that in free agency. I don't think they need to sink the investment in of a first-round pick to the running back. As much as I love Najee Harris, as much as I love Travis Etienne, again, you take somebody in that first round, you know that you have that option to have their 5th-year option activated and keep them for 5 years? And do you really see that running back position as being necessary to lock it down for 5 years and also know that in that 5th year, you're going to pay them a significant dollar? Do you want to sacrifice that to the running back, or would you rather give it to the offensive line or the defensive line or linebacker or corner or any other of these positions? Ooh, see, good point here from Daniel. Aaron Jones is projected at $14 million per year as per Spot Track. I don't know if he's going to get that coming out of Green Bay, although he is explosive, and there's a lot of proponents in Aaron Jones's camp for him getting paid because he's had a really good year and he's very electric. But yeah, that $14 million per year, is wild. I like the comment here from Kurt regarding Matt Breida. Yeah, I wouldn't mind kicking the tires on Matt Breida. I think he's someone you could get on a 1 year, $2 to $3 million deal, low risk, low investment. Again, fast, agile, can catch out of the backfield, has home run threat ability. I know he had some injury issues last year, but he's somebody that I wouldn't mind taking a chance on. Another comment here. There are great running backs for the 3rd and later rounds this year. Khalil Herbert, Kenneth Gainwell. That's a very good point. There is always, you have to make sure you hit on it, as you do with any pick, but there is value to be had at the running back position. When I say value, I mean starting caliber value in rounds, even starting as early as round 2, but you can get quality running back value at rounds 3, 4, and 5. And I know some of us are knocking the season that Devin Singletary and Zach Moss had last year. Moss was effective when he was in there, and Singletary, although he's not an all-pro, I think he deserves more credit than he's currently getting. And I know he's not, again, an all-pro running back, and he's not setting the world on fire, but he's had 2 good years. And again, he's a day 2 pick, not somebody that you had to break the bank on and that you're going to have to break the bank on in the future because of the play style that he has. And Kurt, there you go. You hit it right on the head with Matt Breida. Yeah, he is similar to James White. I like the comment from Taylor. Javonte Williams, the running back from North Carolina. He's someone who I like a lot. You put his tape on, and it's just really, really impressive. I'm going to get to the couple other comments regarding this topic. Another one from Kurt, interior lineman or someone in the secondary. That's what I'm looking for in round 1 as well, based on how some of the other dominoes fall when it comes to Matt Milano and Darrell Williams and positions that we have to address and holes that we have to fill. I would second that as well. And then another comment here from Kevin, tight ends and a running back on the offense, pass rushers and corners on the defense, all in the draft. Fair. My only issue with tight end is it's hard to expect a lot of production, or at least immediate production, from a rookie tight end. I don't think, unless you're getting Kyle Pitts, which I doubt Kyle Pitts is going to fall. He might even go in the top 5. Unless you're getting Kyle Pitts, I don't think you're going to receive that return on investment from a rookie tight end to have a significant impact in the 2021 season. Running back, I'm fine with that as well, but I'm not burning a first-round pick on a running back because of the positional value that I would rather invest on early and then have a 5th-year option for down the road. As far as pass rushers and corners, I'm all about that. I am all about that life. So again, 5th-year option, a lot of numbers, a lot of money, but that 5th year, knowing that you have someone locked in, pretty much almost guaranteed for 5 years, and they are under control in terms of contract term, and then knowing that they're under control monetarily, and some having a really good offensive lineman on their 5th-year option or a really good defensive lineman on a 5th-year option might represent really good value. Having a running back on their 5th-year option, not so much, based on the capital that you have to sacrifice and the resources you have to allocate to that. So keep that in your brains and in your minds as we move forward in this draft season. That little bit of a hidden storyline, that 5th-year option for first-round picks. One, how it's changed under the new CBA and what it means going forward, but also how that changes, not just because of the change in the structure of the 5th-year option, but how it maybe changes your mind in terms of who you draft, knowing how you're able to have someone under cost control for that amount of time. And that's the 5th-year option for first-round picks. And this next topic, somewhat of a segue, talking about 5th-year options for first-round picks. Tremaine Edmunds, someone who was a first-round pick, someone who needs his 5th-year option picked up. And I bring this storyline up as though it's hidden, not because necessarily he is under the radar. I think a lot of people have talked about Tremaine Edmunds this year for a variety of reasons, and a lot of those reasons were negative because of his play. You're talking about Tremaine Edmunds, someone who the Bills invested a first-round pick in, someone who people have thrown a lot of expectations onto, his size and his speed and his agility and going into a Sean McDermott defense and success that McDermott has had with Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis and Shaq Thompson. And there's been all this expectation that has been heaped onto Tremaine Edmunds. I think a hidden storyline for him coming up this year in 2021 and this offseason, just in general, what does his year 4 jump look like? How does Tremaine Edmunds take that next step? I think for a lot of people this past year in year 3, I think the eyes were on Josh Allen on offense, Tremaine Edmunds on defense. How would they take those next leaps in their game? And I think that with the year that Josh Allen had, which was tremendous, I think it put an even bigger microscope and spotlight on Tremaine Edmunds because he did not make a similar jump. Granted, I think there were significant factors that hindered his production and his ability in this past season in 2020. Star Lotulelei opting out meant offensive linemen could get to Tremaine easier, and he had to fight through a lot of trash and fight off defenders just to make a play. Matt Milano being out for a significant amount of time hurt Tremaine Edmunds. When Milano is in there, he is so dynamic and causes such chaos that Tremaine Edmunds is usually the benefactor and benefits off of the chaos that Milano causes, and he gets to clean it up. Also, just off of his individual self, Tremaine Edmunds getting that shoulder injury earlier in the year, he had to adjust to that. He had to play different. It changed his processing rate because he was thinking more and trying to adjust more, and you could see him thinking out there. He wasn't able to play fast. Oh, really good comment from Kurt. Hopefully the game slows down for him and he becomes more instinctive. When he had that shoulder injury, you could almost see him thinking. You could almost see him trying to process and read. You could almost hear it watching the film and watching the broadcast. And then as he got a little healthier, and then as Milano came back, we saw him start to read and react more and play faster. Also, I'm seeing some of the other comments come in regarding Trevin Merrick and Zaven Collins. I'm going to get to those because ironically, and it's almost as if you guys have peeked into my notes, I have some thoughts and some topics on those things that those comments will fit into nicely as we continue to go forward. But staying on Tremaine Edmunds, he had significant factors that hindered his play again. Star Lotulelei being out, Matt Milano being out, the injury that Tremaine suffered. But as much as he had those factors, and I think people are being too harsh on him at times, and I still think the future is still bright for him. He did have a rough year. When we're talking about some grades and thinking some stuff, again, Pro Football Focus doesn't account for sample size. So even if you only played one game, it's going to put your numbers and percentages in there at the same amount as it would somebody who played all 18 games last year, or 16, 17, 15, whatever. So PFF doesn't take sample size into account. But looking at Tremaine Edmunds, he was the 30th graded Bills defender in 2020. That's out of 31. The only player that was overall graded worse on the Bills defense was Daryl Morley. He was 17th on the Bills in run defense grade, 17th on the Bills in tackling grade, 26th on the Bills in pass rushing grade, 28th on the Bills in coverage grade. He also led the team in missed tackles. However, on the other side, he was second on the team in total tackles. He was second on the team in stops. He was third on the team in snaps, despite having that shoulder injury. He gutted it out, and I think that, unfortunately, was to his detriment because it made people rip him even further and talk about his poor play, even though he was gutting it out and playing with one arm at times, which is hard for anyone, let alone a linebacker who has to use his arm to make tackles, shed blocks, bat passes, catch, so on and so forth. And another fun little stat, he was tied for the most missed tackles amongst all linebackers in the NFL when it came to the passing game, which is also not good considering how much teams pass nowadays and how much is asked of Buffalo Bills linebackers and a Sean McDermott defense because nickel is our base and the responsibilities that they have when it comes to the pass game. So Tremaine Edmunds, threw out some numbers, some metrics, some measurables. He didn't have the best of years in 2020, but I also don't think the world is on fire and falling apart when it comes to him. we are picking up his fifth-year option. He's still just a baby, 22 years old. He's got so much growing to do mentally, but also physically. He's going to continue to fill out and get bigger, may even get stronger, maybe even a little bit faster. And then the mental side of the game, the processing, the recognition, the understanding of the game and how to quarterback a defense, he will continue to get better in all those areas. The question is, how much will he continue to get better? I think that's why this is my second hidden storyline for the Bills in 2021, this Tremaine Edmunds year 4 jump. What does that year 4 jump look like? There were so many people who thought coming into this past year in 2020 that Edmunds is going to solidify himself as a top 5 linebacker in the league, maybe even the best linebacker in the league. How does he play? Oh, man, he's going to be great. He's going to crush it. Him on defense, Allen on offense, pillars of the franchise. And then the season ended, and there were a lot of people throwing out a lot of negative terms and connotations when it came to Tremaine Edmunds. And on a weekly basis, you saw on the internet, you saw on Twitter, you saw on social media and Reddit and all these different types of platforms, people just pointing out every single thing that he did wrong and just really raking him over the coals for it. And he deserves some of it, but I also think some of it was a bit undeserved and a bit unfair. And so I come into this year, he's my biggest individual player focus. This past year, Josh Allen was my biggest player focus. I wanted to know if he would solidify himself as the Bills franchise quarterback, if he would take another jump in terms of his mental processing and his mechanics. And Josh Allen did that, had a phenomenal year. Going into 2021, and I think this storyline will become less under the radar and more pronounced as we get closer towards the regular season, but it's just not being talked about right now. What Tremaine Edmunds' jump looks like in year 4 is my biggest individual player watch of the whole team, especially, and Taylor, you threw out this comment here, he needs Milano next to him. If we're looking for Tremaine Edmunds to be the franchise guy on the defense, along with Tre'Davious White, again, we're looking at the core of this Bills team going forward and what it should be, ideally, for all intents and purposes, at least right now. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Tre'Davious White, Deion Dawkins, Tremaine Edmunds. Edmunds needs to solidify his spot. He needs to do that. And you can't have a guy, as Taylor's comment stated there, he needs Milano next to him. You can't have a guy be the sole focus of the defense in terms of being like the franchise cornerstone on the defense or being a guy that you can really build around if he needs that much support that one player being out makes a massive difference in his game. No one, again, this is somewhat of an unfair comparison because Luke Kuechly was arguably, if not the best linebacker in the NFL during his tenure, especially towards the end there before he retired early. But nobody was, even when the Panthers were shorthanded, nobody was talking about, well, Luke Kuechly needs all this support. He needs another guy to be able to do this and do that. Kuechly's play recognition and his film study combined with his physical measurables and ability was so tremendous that he really didn't need anything. You could just put him on the field and he could go. And that's why he was the best linebacker in the NFL. And if we want Tremaine Edmunds to get to that level, he has to take significant jumps in his game. I still think the potential for that ceiling is there. It's not over. And people talking about that we shouldn't pick up his 5th-year option and he's garbage and he's done. Those are, I don't want to say blasphemous, but those are wildly negative and somewhat absurd takes. He's still very young. He's still got a lot of growing to do, and he's flashed a lot. But this year 4, much like this past year for Josh Allen, is Allen going to be the guy, or is he someone that we have to surround with a lot in order to make him good? Same thing for Edmunds coming into this year. Can he solidify his spot as a franchise cornerstone on this defense? Does he solidify himself? Like on offense this past year, we know it's Allen and Diggs going forward. After this year, after Edmunds' year 4, are we able to say, cool, it's Edmunds and Tre'Davious White going forward? Do we know that? Are we able to say that? Edmunds needs to solidify that and stamp that hard. And especially, again, as some people mentioned in the comments there, if Milano leaves and Tremaine Edmunds' play takes a significant backstep and he regresses significantly, that is a big problem for this team in terms of how do we fix that position and how do we address that? Because if we lose Matt Milano this offseason, which there's a decent probability and chance that we do, if we lose Milano and then Tremaine Edmunds regresses, we are sitting there at the linebacker position at this offseason knowing that we basically need like a complete overhaul and a complete revamp. Unless we use a first-round pick on a linebacker or sign another in free agency unless somebody emerges during this season. If we're sitting here knowing that Edmunds regressed and Milano is gone, that position is DEFCON 1,000 and it needs to be addressed. So Tremaine Edmunds, it's under the radar for now. Again, I think as we get closer to the season, it will be more of a primetime spotlight focus. But what kind of jump does he make in year 4 is a big one for me. Again, under the radar, hidden storyline for now. Also a bit hidden and under the radar on the defense. The development of AJ Epenesa. This one for me stems from the position grouping of the defensive line as a whole for the Buffalo Bills. What does the future of the defensive line and the edge look like for the Buffalo Bills? We've already got people throwing out we need to cut Addison and Butler and Jefferson and cut Jerry Hughes, which is blasphemous and completely wrong. Jerry Hughes is a force and needs to stay, so we're not doing that. But this defensive line, aside from AJ Epenesa and aside from Ed Oliver, you really don't have any heavy starting caliber youth on the defensive line. I know we're still hoping that Daryl Johnson can be a stable thing. Seeing Justin Zimmer flash was nice. I know Harrison Phillips is young, but when it comes to pure forces, guys who are going to see a heavy majority of snaps and be strong fixtures on that defensive line for the future right now, all we're really hanging our hat on is Ed Oliver and AJ Epenesa. And this defensive line needs some tweaks. They need some youth, as evidenced by the fact that majority of Bills fans want to throw a majority of the defensive line into the lake and cut them forever. The development of AJ Epenesa this offseason and going into 2021 is a very important piece because the defensive line is so important in a Sean McDermott defense. As we've stated multiple times on the show, McDermott and co want to mainly just rush forward. They want to play games. They want to stunt. They want to vary their attack, but they really just want to rush forward. They might simulate some pressure, throw some double A gap blitz now and again, or just muddle up the offensive line and crowd some things and then drop out and rush forward. But in order to do that consistently, in order to generate consistent pressure with your front four, you need quality starters, and you also need quality depth and rotation to be able to rotate a steady group of about 6 or 7 and know that you can affect and impact both the pass and the run and know that there's not a lot of drop off. AJ Epenesa being drafted last year in the 2nd round. He flashed a lot towards the end of the year. I really liked what he did from about the Arizona Cardinal game on. He got a concussion in that Cardinals game and left, but before that, he was looking really good. And if you look just at the stats, he was 6th on the team in pressures in 2020, and he was 7th on the team in pass rush snaps. But when you look at the percentage, he had a 9.2 pressure rate, which isn't amazing, but it was 3rd on the team behind Jerry Hughes, who was at 14.5, and Mario Addison, who was at 10%. So he came on as the season progressed, and the more snaps he got, the more comfortable he looked. We saw him shed a bunch of weight, and his speed was really on point, especially and really on display towards the back end of the year. We saw him impact a lot of things. We saw him use that long arm technique that he loves to gain leverage on offensive tackles and be able to affect the quarterback and impact the pocket. We saw him set the edge well at times. We also saw him get upfield too much and leave his gap open, allow the running back to get upfield, allow the quarterback to scramble because he broke contain and didn't take a proper rush lane and maintain his integrity when going after the quarterback. He did some things that a rookie does. But his development this offseason with a full offseason under his belt, not a COVID offseason, seeing what he can do is a big thing. I see the super sticker coming out. Thank you so much, Truth to Hearts, for the donation. These type of things, I say it every time they come through. I don't just throw them up. They mean a lot just from the actual financial implication, but also just from an emotional standpoint to see that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And going with the comment here, people who say Edmunds needs Milano is reacting off of emotion. All middle linebackers need adequate pieces around them. No middle linebacker carries a bad defense. They all need help. And I think that's fair to a degree. You need your defensive line to keep you clean. You need your other partners at the linebacker position and even in the secondary to do their 1/11th and fill their role properly and do their job and execute their assignment. But I think, truth to hearts, I think the comment for why people say Edmunds needs Milano is because of the role that Milano occupies and how it benefits Edmunds. Like you see, Eric Turner from Cover One did a tremendous thread back in October showing all the time blitzes that Milano does and the chaos that he causes. And he labeled him as a disruptor on defense. And Milano would cause such havoc that it would allow Edmunds to just read and react and use his speed and agility and then make a play on the ball carrier. I think that for me is where it stems from. I saw what Milano would do and how Edmunds would benefit off of it and be able to just use his ability and play. He would be able to stay clean and he'd just be able to read and react. I think that for me is where it comes from, but I recognize your point there. I think people often think that superstars just go and do it on their own. And that's why you see wins attributed to quarterbacks or wins that are attributed to linebackers, where people are like, oh, the Bills were 12-0. Matt Milano is 12-0, but not really. There's a massive amount of starters. There's 3 faces of the ball. There's tons of coaches. Oh, here's a good point here from Taylor to support that thought. Devin White's defensive line was better than Edmunds's. Let's get our defensive line to that level. And I think a piece also that isn't talked about enough in that Bucs Super Bowl run, Vita Vea coming back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and occupying such a massive spot on that defensive line to keep both Levante David and Devin White clean and free and allow them to track sideline to sideline and get into the backfield and make plays. It's something that I don't think it's stated enough. And we talked about the Buccaneers pass rush a lot and Shaq Barrett and Pierre Paul and how they got to Mahomes. But Vita Vea just taking up blockers and eating dudes up front to keep White and Levante David clean. Eric Turner and I in the film room talked about Ray Lewis. And in his career, he had Tony Siragusa and Sam Adams. And then he got Haloti Ngata, guys up front who just stuck in the middle, took up blockers, and let their rangy, athletic, smart linebackers rack up stats and make plays. Edmunds does need that, but any middle linebacker needs that. That's why I'm excited to see Starla Tulele hopefully come back, or the Bills potentially draft someone like Tyler Shelvin from LSU in this draft to occupy that middle of the defensive line and support the run, but also keep Edmunds in the linebacking core free and clean. And here's a comment here from Kurt. Main guy slash investment, the big 3 on offense: Dawkins, Allens, Diggs. On defense, White, Edmunds, Milano, or is it D-line? I would like it to be Milano. I don't know if they're going to be able to afford him. That average annual value as per Spotrac right now is like 13.8. It's around 14 million. I don't know if he's necessarily going to get that with the nuclear winter offseason that we're in, but Milano's a quality linebacker. Somebody's going to pay him. I do think the only way the Bills don't keep Milano is if he gets just like a ridiculously good offer from someone else and he's out. I think they will be aggressive in trying to bring him back. They like him. He likes it here. They understand the importance of Milano. But if we can't bring him back, then I think to your question there, or is it D-line, I think who the Bills go after, whether it's free agency like a J.J. Watt or in the draft, I think who they bring in that defensive line suddenly becomes an impact player, unless Ed Oliver makes a big jump. Big jump. Not that he isn't already a good player. He's another guy who's better than people realize. But unless Oliver makes a jump to superstar status, I think that third big piece on defense would either be Milano or someone on the defensive line that they've yet to bring in. Or potentially, as we're still sitting here talking about AJ Epenesa, it could be AJ Epenesa. Everything from the shoulders up for AJ Epenesa is real quality. His mental ability, his hard work, his work ethic, his attitude, his motor, everything, he gives it all. And just seeing him cut that weight this year and maintain that takes dedication, that takes focus, that takes vigilance. Having that already established in the mind of a rookie, again, I can't say enough about that. And to bring it back to what I started getting to before we started going into the comments here and the great donation from Truth to Hearts, having a full off season for AJ Epenesa, full off season with coaches, training staff, diet, regiment, everything, playbook, after having a year of being in the system and kind of knowing what's going on, having the coaching continuity coming back for his second year, having a full off season that is not a COVID off season last year. I think last year was tough for a lot of rookies and tough for defenders to be able to put things together and be able to gel and develop continuity. I think we could see a big year for AJ Epenesa in year 2. I think we could see him take a leap where he is in that top 3 for rotation at the defensive end spot, at that edge rusher spot. I think we could see him potentially be an every down starter, guy who sees a lot of snaps. alongside Jerry Hughes. And if we get that from AJ Epenesa, that would be massive. That is a big feather in the cap of this defense going forward. If AJ Epenesa turns into the every down contributor, and I don't want to say every down, making you think like he's going to be on the field for 100% of the snaps. No defensive lineman really is for the Bills, but being that guy that sees a majority of the snaps in the front four, that would be a big thing. So the development of AJ Epenesa, I think, is something that's a hidden storyline right now. Again, not being talked about a ton, but something that will have a big impact on this defense, because if he can develop into what we need him to be, it makes it easier to continue to tweak this defensive line going forward. Because again, this defensive line, even if Addison and Butler and Jefferson and all the additions last year, even if they all hit and were amazing, this defensive line still needed to get younger this year and going forward. Now you had all the salary cap concerns and the struggles of Addison and Butler and Jefferson, although I still like Jefferson. I think Butler may be gone, though. Addison is kind of up in the air. Bills' defensive line needs to get more pressures. They need to get more sacks. They need to generate more rush. And they still, even if all those guys, again, hit, they still need to get younger. The development of AJ Epenesa is big, because if he develops into who we need him to be, that helps the production aspect, but it also helps the youth aspect. That's somebody that, okay, we know we already have a piece here. He's young. He's good. Boom, that helps us in the future and going forward. And as Kurt mentioned here, he's got a bit of nasty in him. He does. And I like this other comment. I'm a fan of AJ. Thought it was a great pick. Liked him more than, I know you're talking about Gross Matos from Penn State last year. Yeah, I liked Epenesa's motor. I liked his physicality. I would have been cool either way, but I did lean a bit more towards Epenesa, and I was still surprised that he lasted up until where the Bills got him in the second round. But I think a lot of that was because just he didn't test off the charts and have amazing measurables. I wanted to get to this question here from Luke Ryan. Any chance McBean brings in Kaiir Short? I think they kicked the tires on him. I think they kicked the tires on pretty much anything and everything, let alone a former All-Pro Carolina Panther. That just checks and ticks too many boxes. I think they will kick the tires on him. Whether or not they bring him in officially and sign him, I don't know. I also wouldn't hang your hat on it. Eric and I talked about it in the film room that we did on Tuesday, talking about the value could be there, but if you're expecting to cut a bunch of guys and throw money at Kaiir Short and he's going to fix the defensive line and automatically be the all-pro that he was. He's missed significant time the last couple of years. He is 32 years old. It's not the same scenario as thinking about what the Bills did with Darrell Williams last offseason, where they picked up a former Panther, a former all-pro, and he had a tremendous year. Don't think that same scenario will happen if the Bills bring in Short. It could happen, but the odds of it happening are significantly lower than it was with Darrell Williams coming in last year. Want to get to this comment here from Matthew. Not hanging my hat on an underweight Epenesa holding up as a starter, bulked up even slower. Maybe he tweaks his body a little bit, maybe puts on a little more mass. I think with his toughness and his tenacity and the motor, again, he's slimmed down, but he's not slim to the point where he's like Aaron Maben thin and he can't hold up and maintain and set the edge and go through an NFL season of physicality. I think he'll get into further NFL shape and stay lean combined with that muscle. I'm not too worried about him holding up, or I don't know if you mean from like a technique standpoint or a skill standpoint or just like the physical aspect of like holding up through an NFL season, but I'm not too worried about it. But I respect where your head's at and I do like it. And as we move to the last of the Buffalo Bills hidden storylines for 2021, and apologies to whoever made that comment about Merrick from the safety from TCU in this year's draft. I mentioned that we're going to be talking about the safeties a little bit. Oh, there we go. It was Kurt. I found it. Am I crazy, or do they need to find a young safety? Trevon Merrick from TCU is kind of the consensus top safety in this upcoming draft. More free safety than he is box. So he's somebody that I like, and I like his tape. I have to get into the all-22, but I like what I've seen so far. I bring up the future of the safety position because of this. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are fantastic. I think they are arguably, if not the best safety tandem in the NFL. They're both extremely versatile. They both can play free safety. They both can play strong safety. Poyer is the better blitzer and better coming up and supporting the run, but Hyde can also do that. Hyde can cover in the slot. He can be effective. The reason that this is a hidden storyline for me this offseason and a bit going forward is after Hyde and Poyer, there is no real starting depth behind these two. As much as we like Dean Marlowe, I still love Jaquan Johnson. I loved a bit Miami. but I don't know if I'm ready to sit here and say that he can easily step in and be a starter. At a certain point, we need to have more starting depth and start to think about what happens at the future of the safety position for the Buffalo Bills. Micah Hyde is a free agent in 2022, and he turns 31 this year. Jordan Poyer is a free agent in 2023, and he turns 30 in April. I was doing my notes for this episode, watching the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Greg and Aaron last night, which was tremendous. And they started talking about the safety position, doing their season in review. And I already had this thought in my brain, and then they started talking about the future of the safety position, and it triggered things even more for me. Their versatility for Poyer and Hyde, what they are able to do, what they allow the defense to do in terms of change up their scheme and their ability to disguise coverage, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, combined with the fact that they execute at a high level. It's not just that they're versatile. It's that they're versatile and they affect the scheme so much, and that they impact the game because they execute on a high level. They tick so many boxes just as an NFL player, but especially in this Sean McDermott defense, that if one of them were to go down, God forbid, knock on wood, or if we're looking at this defense in 2-3 years and one of them is gone, that impacts the defense significantly. So starting to think about the future of the Bills defense in terms of the future of the safety position, do we start looking at safety in this draft? If someone falls in the first or second, what do we do? If there's a good free agent available, is it next offseason when we start to look into some things? I'm just not tremendously comfortable if Hyde or Poyer were to miss time. And I know that, okay, Dean Marlowe has to be the starter for a significant amount of games. That worries me a little bit. And then if you apply that to the future, again, what does the defense look like in the future? I love the core that we have now. But again, 5 years from now, Tremaine Edmunds in a perfect world will still be a part of the Bills defensive core. Tre'Davious White will still be a part of the Bills defensive core. Hyde and Poyer, although safety is a position that ages a little better than other positions on defense, it's not as tremendous of a drop-off when you start to get older. But that's just part of the game. Eventually, they're going to slow down a bit, or they might pick up some injuries or some nicks, and they might not be as effective. And what do we do with that position? Great point here from Kurt. Poyer is a Swiss Army knife. He plays almost 50% of the time like a linebacker. He does a lot. He occupies a space and a role on this team that is significant. And finding people to fill into those roles and start to mitigate any potential drop-off after them is something that the Bills need to start to look into. And I don't know if it's necessarily this offseason, whether in free agency or the draft, but and we look at some players. You look at Nazrul Dean, the safety prospect from Florida State, somebody that everybody's clamoring for to hit that big nickel role. It might do double duty. Bring in Nazrul Dean now, and he's functioning as a big nickel in his first couple of years, and then he can start to transition to a full-time safety role towards the back end of his contract to fill in for Poyer or fill in for Hyde, little things like that. And I'm also not saying that that's the easiest transition, and Nazrul Dean is built for that and can do that right now. He's got some deficiencies in his game as well, but that is something that has to be thought of. And a comment here from T-Dope, probably next offseason we'll move priority of safety up. We got to build slow with the COVID budget. That's a fair assessment. And I would agree with that to a pretty decent degree. I don't think this is the offseason to spend significant money or draft capital in that depth right now, but going forward, yes, we will need to. And even now it's an area of concern. Just again, looking towards the future, it's easy to get caught up in what you have now and not continue to replenish your resources and not continue to build and have depth and build and have depth. And you can be a team that was good and look like they had a really good Super Bowl window, and then you have a good run for 2 or 3 years, and then you fall off the face of the earth. And with how important that safety position is to this Bills defense and everything that it does, making sure that we have talent and youth there and know who the next man up is and what the future looks like is something that will have to be addressed at some point. And as we start to wind down here, I'm going to bring up my favorite part of the show, which is the Toodles You Guys banner, just because I like saying the word Toodles. It's fun and it excites me. Those are the hidden storylines for the Buffalo Bills in 2021. And I'm sure there's going to be more that'll develop as we start to go through and as the draft happens and as free agency happens. Well, free agency will happen before the draft. But as new players come in and players go out and cuts are made and trades are made and signings and draft picks and so on and so forth. And we see money that's committed and new contracts and potentially a new contract for Josh Allen this offseason. All these things, there will be more storylines that develop. But right now, the ones that I mentioned here in this episode are ones for you to keep your eye on, both in 2021 and with an eye towards the future. Again, all of it in the name of the Bills sustaining the success that they've had and building upon it. We are not here for 1 to 2 years of success. We want the Bills to be as close to a dynasty as they can be. We want sustained success. We want year after year division titles, deep playoff runs, chances at a Super Bowl, a realistic chance at the Super Bowl year in and year out. And the only way to do that is to continue to stay relevant and successful. And the only way to continue to do that is continuing to replenish the I see the comment there from Joseph and Straight Face. It excites me. I appreciate you. You got me off track there. The only way to continue to stay relevant and stay successful is continue to draft well, bring in talent, identify talent, coach, scout, develop, sign, draft. And we've got some guys that are still in that development mode, like Tremaine Edmunds and AJ Epenesa. And we've got some other areas like first-round picks or a first-round pick in this year draft and drafts going forward that carry a fifth-year option that their talent and contract and cost control can go a long way towards keeping the Bills relevant and keeping that sustainable success. And then we've got positions like the safety position in terms of getting younger and maintaining talent there as we look towards the future, because as much as it breaks my heart, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde won't be here forever. I would love them to be. If we could somehow give them like T-9000 Terminator like exoskeletons or something like that and be able to just convert their body to some sort of awesome cyborg or robot, I'd be all down for that and be able to keep them for forever. That would be tremendous. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, because Sarah Connor took down Skynet and now we're just left with regular humanity. I want to thank everybody for watching this episode, listening to this episode, whether you're watching live, watching later, listening now, listening later, whatever. Everybody in the chat, I wish I could call out everybody individually, but I tremendously appreciate every single one of you for your watch, your listen, your download, your comments, the live interaction, the engagement. I love it. It adds an extra element to doing this podcast, and it's tremendous. I love it. Thank you to Truth to Hearts for that awesome donation. That genuinely means a lot to me. I greatly appreciate it, and the team at Cover One appreciates it as well. Again, thank you to everyone. Please rate and review and subscribe. I know, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it may seem trivial, but it actually means a lot towards the podcast trending and getting seen by more eyes, and that is the end goal and what we're really trying to build here at Cover One and what I'm trying to build. Follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. Give me a follow on Twitter, please. I like this comment from Joseph. Sarah Connor, come with me if you want to live. That's exactly what it is. Thanks. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate you. T-Dope, thank you, my man. I appreciate you stopping by as always. I like everybody who saw some new names, some new comments tonight, and then also a lot of regulars who ride with me every week. I appreciate everybody. Thank you guys so much. Hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all staying safe, whether it's with COVID or something else or weather concerns. There's a lot of nonsense going on throughout the world and the country right now. Again, I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones all stay safe. Thank you so much for the support. Joseph throwing out, smash that like button before we all go. Thank you so much, Joseph. And thank you to everybody. Sage with the comment of great show. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Again, stay safe. I'll see you next week. And as always, go Bills.